Hello, and welcome to the Dennis Yarmouth Theatre Company's production of
The first act of The Importance of Being Earnest.
A play written by Oscar Wilde in 1895. It is a classic comedy of manners
and mistaken identities.
The first scene of our production takes place in Manhattan in 1930.
The second scene just a few days later in Long Island.
And the second act a few hours after that.
Each act was recorded live and separately.
So feel free to use the intermission for refreshments as you would like.
Did you hear what I was playing, Lane?
I did not think it polite to listen, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. For your sake. I don't play accurately. Anyone can play accurately, but I play with such wonderful expression. As far as the piano is concerned, sentiment is my forte. I save science for life.
Yes, sir.
And speaking of the science of life, Lane, have you got the cucumber sandwiches cut for Madame Bracknell?
Yes, sir.
Oh, by the way, Lane, I see that in your book on last Thursday night when Mr. Shorman and Mr. Worthing were dining with me, 8 bottles of champagne were consumed.
Yes, sir. 8 bottles and a pint.
Why is it, Lane, that at a bachelor's establishment, the staff invariably drink the champagne? I ask merely for information.
I attribute it to the superior quality of the champagne, sir. I have often observed that in married households the wine is rarely of a first-rate brand.
Good heavens, is marriage as demoralizing as that?
I believe it is a very pleasant state, sir. I have very little experience of it myself up to the present. I have only been married once. That was in consequence of a misunderstanding between myself and a young person.
I do not know that I care much about your personal life, Lane.
No, sir. It is not a very interesting subject. I never think of it myself.
Very natural, I'm sure. Thank you, Lane. That will do.
Thank you, sir.
Lane's views on marriage seem somewhat lax. Really, if the lower orders can't set us a good example, what on earth is the use of them? They seem, as a class, to have no sense whatsoever of moral responsibility.
Mr. Ernest Worthing.
Ernest, how are you? What brings you up to the city?
Oh, pleasure, pleasure. What brings anyone anywhere? Eating as usual, I see, Algie?
Well, I believe it is customary. Where have you been since last Thursday?
Oh, in the country.
What on earth do you do there?
When one is in the city, one amuses oneself. When one is in the country, one amuses other people. It's excessively boring.
And who are the people you amuse in the country?
Oh, neighbors.
Got nice neighbors in your part of Rhode Island?
Oh, perfectly horrid. I never speak to one of them.
How immensely you must amuse them. Oh, by the way, Rhode Island is your country, is it not?
Rhode Island? Yes. Say, Algie, what's with all these cups? What's with the cucumber sandwiches? Who's coming?
Oh, merely Aunt Augusta and Gwendolyn.
Ah, how perfectly delightful.
Yes, that is all well and good, but I'm not quite sure that Aunt Augusta will like that you are here.
Why not?
My dear boy, the way you flirt with Gwendolyn is perfectly disgraceful.
Well,
it is almost as bad as the way Gwendolyn flirts with you.
Well, I'm in love with Gwendolyn. In fact, I've come up to town expressly to propose to her.
I thought you would come up for pleasure. I call that business.
How utterly unromantic you are.
I don't see anything romantic in proposing. It is very romantic to be in love, yes, but there's nothing romantic about a definite proposal. One may be accepted, one usually is, I believe, but then after that, all of the excitement is gone. The very essence of romance is uncertainty. If I ever get married, I'll certainly do my best to forget the fact.
I have no doubt about that, my dear boy. The divorce court was invented specially for those whose minds are so curiously constituted.
Oh, there is no use speculating on that subject. Divorces are made in heaven. Oh, please don't eat the cucumber sandwiches. They're made specially for Aunt Augusta.
Well, you've been eating them all this time.
Well, that's quite a different matter. She is my aunt. Have some bread and butter. The bread and butter is for Gwendolyn. Gwendolyn is devoted to bread and butter.
And a very good bread and butter it is, too.
Yes, but you need not eat it as if you're going to eat it all. You act as if you're married to her already. You're not married to her already, and I doubt you ever will be.
Why on earth do you say that?
I don't give my consent.
Your consent?
My dear boy, Gwendolyn is my first cousin. And before I allow you to marry her, you will have to clear up the whole question of Cecily.
Cecily? What do you mean by Cecily? I don't know anyone of the name of Cecily. Come on, Algie. Who's Cecily?
Bring me that pocket watch that Mr. Worthing left here last time he dined.
Do you mean to say you've had my pocket watch all this time? I wish to goodness you had told me. I was writing frantic letters to the police station about it. I was very nearly offering a large reward.
Well, I wish you would offer one.
Well, there's no use offering a reward now that the thing is found.
I think that's rather mean of you, Ernest, I must say. However, now that I examine the thing, I find that it does not matter, because this pocket watch is not yours after all.
Well, of course it's mine. You've seen me with it 100 times. Besides, you have no right to read what's written on the inside of a private pocket watch. It's a very ungentlemanly thing to do.
Oh, it is absurd to have a hard and fast rule about what one should read and what one shouldn't. Half of all modern culture depends on what one shouldn't read.
Of course I know that, but I don't propose to discuss modern culture. It's not the sort of thing one talks about in private. I just want my pocket watch back.
Yes, but this isn't your pocket watch. This pocket watch is a gift from someone of the name of Cecily. And you said yourself, you know no one of that name.
Well, if you must know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt?
Yes, and a very charming lady she is, too. She lives in Hoboken. Just give it back to me, Algie.
Yes, but why does your aunt, who lives in Hoboken, call herself your little Cecily? From little Cecily with her fondest love.
Well, what on earth is there in that? Some aunts are tall, some aunts are not tall. Certainly an aunt may be allowed to decide that for herself. Come on, Algie, good heavens, just give it back.
Yes, but why does your aunt call you her uncle? From little Cecily with her fondest love to her dear Uncle Jack. There is no objection, I admit, to an aunt being a small aunt, but why an aunt, no matter what her size may be, should call her own nephew her uncle, I can't quite make out. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all. It's Ernest.
It isn't Ernest, it's Jack.
Well, you have always told me it was Ernest. You answered the name of Ernest. I've introduced you to everyone as Ernest. You look as if your name was Ernest. You are the most earnest-looking person I've seen in my whole life. It's perfectly absurd you're saying that your name isn't Ernest. It's on your cards. Here's one of them. Mr. Ernest Worthing, the Albany. And I'll keep this as proof of your name being Ernest, if you ever try to deceive me, or Gwendolyn, or anyone else.
Well, my name is Ernest in the city, and Jack in the country. And that pocket watch was given to me in the country.
Yes, but that does not account for the fact that your dear Aunt Cecily, who lives at Hoboken, calls you her uncle. Come now, you much better have the thing out with.
Well, I produce my pocket watch first.
Here it is. Now, produce your explanation, and pray make it improbable.
My dear, there's nothing improbable about what I have to say. In fact, my explanation is perfectly ordinary. Old Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a little boy, named me in his will guardian to his granddaughter Cecily. Cecily, who calls me her uncle out of motives of respect that you cannot possibly appreciate, lives at my place in the country under the careful watch of her admirable governess, Miss Prism.
Where is that place in the country, by the way?
Well, that is nothing to you. You shall not be invited. I may candidly tell you that the place is not in Rhode Island.
I figured that. I've bun buried all over Rhode Island on 2 separate occasions. Now, go on. Why are you Ernest in the city and Jack in the country?
This part I don't know if you'll be able to understand. You're hardly serious enough. When one is placed in the position of guardian, one must adopt a high moral tone on all subjects. It's one's duty to do so. And as such a high moral tone can hardly be said to conduce very much to either one's health or one's happiness, in order to get to the city, I've always pretended to have a perfectly scandalous younger brother who lives in the Albany and goes by the name of Earnest. That, my dear friend, is the whole truth, pure and simple.
The truth is rarely pure and never simple. Modern life would be very tedious if it was either, and modern literature a complete impossibility.
Well, that wouldn't be at all a bad thing.
I was quite right in thinking you of being a Bunburyist. You are one of the most advanced Bunburyists I know.
What on earth do you mean by a Bunburyist?
You have invented a very useful younger brother called Earnest, so that you may go up to the city as often as you please. I have invented a perfectly invaluable permanent invalid known as Bunbury, so that I may go down to the country as often as I choose. Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. If it wasn't for Bunbury's extraordinarily bad health, for instance, I wouldn't be able to dine with you tonight at Willis's, for I've really been engaged to Aunt Augusta for more than a week.
I haven't invited you to dine with me anywhere tonight.
Oh, I know you haven't. It is very foolish of you. You always send out invitations and leave me out of them. Nothing annoys people so much as being left out of invitations.
I really think you had better keep your reservation with your aunt.
I have no intention of doing anything of the kind. In the first place, I dine there on Monday, and once a week is quite enough to dine with one's own relations. In the second place, whenever I do dine there, I'm treated as a member of the family and sent where there are either no women at all or just two. In the third place, I know perfectly well who she will seat me next to. She'll seat me next to Mary Farquhar, who always flirts with her husband across the dinner table. That is not very pleasant indeed. That is not even decent. And that sort of thing is enormously on the increase. The amount of women in Manhattan who flirt with their own husbands is perfectly scandalous. It looks so bad. It is like washing one's clean linen in public. Besides, now that I know you to be a confirmed Bunburyist, I naturally want to talk to you about Bunburying. I want to tell you the rules.
I'm not a Bunburyist at all. In fact, if Gwendolyn accepts me, I intend to kill my brother. Indeed, I think I'll kill him in any case. Cecily is beginning to be a little too much interested in him. It's rather a bore. So I will kill Ernest, and I advise you to do the same to your invalid friend with the absurd name.
Nothing will induce me to part with Bunbury. And if you should ever get married, which seems to me extremely problematic, you'll be very happy to know Bunbury. A man who marries without knowing Bunbury has a very tedious time of it.
If I marry Gwendolyn, and she is the only woman that I met that I would marry, I certainly want to know. I wouldn't want to know Bunbury.
Well, then your wife will. You don't seem to realize that in married life, 3 is company and 2 is none. Ah, that must be Aunt Augusta. Only relatives or creditors ever ring in that Wagnerian manner. Now, if I get her away for 10 minutes so that you may have an opportunity of proposing to Gwendolyn, will you allow me to dine with you tonight at Willis's?
I suppose so, if you want to.
Yes, but you must be serious about it. I hate people who are not serious about their meals. It is so shallow of them.
Madam Bracknell and Miss Fairfax.
Good afternoon, dear Algernon. I hope you are behaving very well.
Well, I'm feeling very well, Aunt Augusta.
That is not quite the same thing. In fact, the two things rarely go together.
Dear me, you look smart.
I'm always smart. Aren't I, Mr. Worthing?
You are quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
I hope I'm not that. It will leave no room for developments. And I intend to develop in many directions.
I'm sorry if we're a little late, Algernon, but I was obliged to call on dear Mrs. Harbury. I hadn't been there since her poor husband's death, and I've never seen a woman so altered. She looks quite 20 years younger. And now I'll have a nice cucumber sandwich, just like you promised me.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta.
Won't you come and sit here, Gwendolyn?
Thanks, Mamma. I'm quite comfortable where I am.
Good heavens, Lane, why are there no cucumber sandwiches? I ordered them specially.
There were no cucumbers in the market today, sir. I went down twice.
No cucumbers?
No, sir. Not even for cash.
Thank you, Lane. That will do.
Thank you, sir.
I'm greatly distressed, Aunt Augusta, about there being no cucumbers at the market, not even for cash.
It really makes no matter, Algernon. I had some cookies with Miss Harbury, who seems to me to be living entirely for pleasure now.
I hear her hair has turned quite gold from grief.
It certainly has changed its color, from what cause I, of course, cannot say. I've quite a treat for you tonight, Algernon. I'm going to seat you next to Mary Farquhar. She is such a lovely woman and so attentive to her husband. It's delightful to watch them.
I'm afraid, Aunt Augusta, that I will have to give up the opportunity of dining with you tonight. The fact of the matter is, I've just received a telegram to say that my poor friend Bunbury has fallen very ill again. They seem to think I should be with him.
It is very strange that Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously bad health.
Yes, Bunbury is a terrible invalid.
Well, I must say, Algernon, that I think it is high time that Mr. Bunbury made up his mind whether he was going to live or to die. This shilly-shallying with the question is absurd, and nor do I in any way approve of modern sympathy with invalids. I would consider it morbid. Health is the primary duty of life, and I'm always telling that to your poor uncle, but he never seems to take much notice. Gwendolen, you will accompany me?
Certainly, Mamma.
The charming day it has been, Miss Fairfax.
Pray, don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I always feel quite certain that they mean something else, and that makes me so nervous.
Well, I do mean something else.
Yes, I thought so. In fact, I'm never wrong.
I'd like to be allowed to take advantage of Madame Bracknell's temporary absence.
I would certainly advise you to do so. Mamma has a way of coming back into a room suddenly that I've often had to speak to her about.
Miss Fairfax, ever since I met you, I have loved you more than any girl I've ever met. Since I met you...
Yes, I'm quite aware of the fact. And I often wish that in public, at any rate, you had been more demonstrative. For me, you've always had an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, at an age of ideals. The fact is constantly mentioned in the more expensive monthly magazines, and has reached provincial pulpits, I'm told. And my ideal has always been to love someone by the name of Earnest. There's something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. Ever since Algernon first mentioned to me he had a friend called Earnest, I knew that I was destined to love you.
You really do love me, Gwendolen?
Passionately.
Oh, darling.
Dear Earnest.
But you don't mean to say that you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Earnest, do you?
But your name is Earnest.
Yes, I know it is, but supposing it was something else, do you mean to say you couldn't love me then?
That is merely a metaphysical speculation, and like most metaphysical speculations, has absolutely no reference to the facts of real life as we know them.
Well, personally, darling, to speak quite candidly, I don't quite care for the name of Earnest. I don't think it fits me at all.
It suits you perfectly. It's a divine name. It is music of its own. It produces vibrations.
Well, I think there are lots of other much nicer names. Jack, for instance. A perfectly charming name.
Jack? No. There's very little music in the name Jack, if any at all. Indeed, it does not thrill. I have known several Jacks, and they all, without exception, were more than usually plain. And besides, Jack is a notorious domesticity for John. And I pity any woman who's married to a man called John. She would probably never be allowed to know the entrancing pleasure of a single moment's solitude.
Oh, Gwendolen.
A really safe name is Earnest.
Gwendolen, I must get christened at once. I mean, we must get married at once. There's no time to be lost.
Married, Mr. Worthing?
Well, surely. I love you, and you've made it clear to me that you are not absolutely indifferent to me, Miss Fairfax.
I adore you. You have not proposed to me yet. The subject of marriage has not even been touched on.
Well, may I propose to you now?
It would be an admirable opportunity, and I think it only fair to tell you quite frankly beforehand that I'm fully determined to accept you.
Oh, Gwendolyn.
Yes, Mr. Warden. What have you got to say to me?
Well, you know what I've got to say to you.
Yes, but you don't say it.
Gwendolyn, will you marry me?
Of course, darling. How long have you been about it? I'm afraid you have absolutely no experience in how to propose.
My own one. You were the only one that I ever met that I would marry.
Yes, but men often propose for practice. My brother Gerald certainly does. All my girlfriends tell me so. My, what beautiful eyes you have, Ernest. They are quite pretty. I hope you'll always look at me just like that, especially when there are other people present.
Mr. Worthing, rise, sir, from the semi-recumbent posture. It is most indecorous.
Mamma, I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you. And besides, Mr. Worthing has not quite finished yet.
Finished what, may I ask?
I'm engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Well, of course you're not engaged to anyone. When you do become engaged, I or your father, should his health permit him, will inform you of the fact. An engagement should come upon a young girl as a surprise, pleasant or unpleasant, as the case may be. It is hardly a matter that she can be allowed to arrange for herself. And now I have a few questions to put to you, Mr. Worthing. While I'm making these inquiries, you, Gwendolyn, will wait below in the car.
Mamma!
In the car, Gwendolyn. Gwendolyn, the car.
Yes, Mamma.
I feel bound to tell you that you are not down on my list of eligible young men, although I do have the same list as dear Senator Bolton's wife has. We work together, in fact. However, I'm quite ready to enter your name down should your answers be what a truly affectionate mother requires. How old are you?
29.
A very good age to be married at. I have always been of opinion that a man who desires to get married should either know everything or nothing. And which do you know?
I know nothing, Madam Bracknell.
I am pleased to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate fruit. Touch it and the bloom is gone. The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately, in America, at any rate, it produces no effect whatsoever. Well, if it did, it would prove a serious danger to the upper classes and probably lead to acts of violence in Central Park. But alas, what's your income?
Between $19,000 and $20,000 a year.
In land or in investments?
Investments, chiefly.
That is satisfactory. What between the duties expected of one during one's lifetime and the duties exacted from one after one's death, land has ceased to be either a profit or a pleasure. It gives one position, but prevents one from keeping it up, and that's all that can be said about land.
Well, I do have a country house with some land attached to it, of course.
A country house? Well, how many bedrooms? Well, that point can be cleared up afterwards. Well, you have a townhouse, I hope? A girl with a simple, unspoiled nature such as Gwendolyn could hardly be expected to reside in the country.
I own a place on Park Avenue. It is let yearly to Mrs. Bloxham, but I can get it back whenever I like at 6 months' notice.
Mrs. Bloxham? I don't know her.
Oh, she's a lady very considerably advanced in years. She goes about very little.
Ah, nowadays there's no guarantee of respectability of character. What number on Park Avenue?
149.
The unfashionable side. I knew there was something. Well, that can be easily altered.
The fashion or the side?
Both, if necessary, I presume. Now to minor matters. Are your parents both living?
I have lost both my parents.
To lose one parent, Mr. Worthing, may be regarded as a misfortune. To lose both looks like carelessness. Who was your father? He was evidently a man of some wealth. Did he come from what the radical papers call the purple of commerce, or did he rise in the ranks of society?
I'm afraid I don't know, Madam Bracknell. You see, I had said that I had lost both my parents, but it would be nearer to the truth to say that my parents seem to have lost me. I don't know who I am by birth. I was well found.
Found?
Yes, the old Mr. Thomas Cardew, a man of very charitable and kindly disposition, found me and gave me the name of Worthing because he had a first-class ticket to a place called Worthing. That's a place upstate. It's a lakeside resort.
And where did this charitable gentleman with a first-class ticket to this lakeside resort find you?
In a handbag.
A handbag?
Yes, Madam Bracknell. A rather large brown leather handbag with handles to it. An ordinary handbag, in fact.
In what locality did this Mr. James or Thomas Cardew find this ordinary handbag?
In the cloakroom at Grand Central Station.
The cloakroom at Grand Central Station.
Yes, the New Haven line.
The line is immaterial. Mr. Worthing, I must confess that I feel somewhat bewildered by what you have just told me. To be born, or at any rate bred, in a handbag, whether it had handles or not, seems to me to display a contempt for the ordinary decencies of family life that reminds one of the worst excesses from the French Revolution. And I presume you know what that unfortunate movement led to? After the particular locality in which the handbag was found, a cloakroom at a railway station may serve to conceal a social indiscretion, and has probably indeed been used for that purpose long before now. However, it can hardly be regarded as an assured basis in decent society.
Well, I must ask then what you would advise me to do. I need not say that I would do anything to ensure Gwendolyn's happiness.
I would strongly advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try and acquire some relations as soon as possible, and to make sure you produce one parent of either sex before the season is quite over.
Well, I don't see how I can possibly manage to do that. I can produce the handbag at any moment. It's at my dressing room in the country. I rather think that should satisfy you, Madam Bracknell.
Me, sir? What does it have to do with me? You can hardly imagine that I or Mr. Bracknell would ever dream of allowing our only daughter, a girl brought up with the utmost care and respect, to marry into a cloakroom and form an alliance with a parcel. Good day, Mr. Worthing.
Good day.
You don't mean to say Gwendolyn refused you? I know it is the way she has. She was always refusing people. I think it's rather ill-mannered of her.
No, Gwendolyn is as right as rain. As far as she's concerned, we're already engaged. It's her mother that's the issue. She's perfectly unbearable. She is rather like a Gorgon. Well, I don't really know what a Gorgon is like, but I know that Madame Bracknell is one. In any case, she is a monster without being a myth. It's rather unfair. I'm sorry, Algie. I suppose I shouldn't speak of your relations in this way.
My boy, I love hearing my relations abused. One's relations are just a very tedious group of people that haven't the slightest knowledge of how to live, nor the smallest intention of how to die. I can't put up with mine at all.
That's nonsense.
It isn't.
Well, I won't argue about the thing. You always want to argue about things.
That's what things were originally made for.
Upon my word, if I thought that, I would shoot myself. Well, you don't think that Gwendolyn has any chance of becoming like her mother in, say, 150 years, do you?
All women become like their mothers. That's just their tragedy. No man does, and that is his.
Is that supposed to be clever?
Well, it's perfectly phrased, and quite as true as any observation of civilized life should be.
Ugh. Well, everyone's clever nowadays. I can't stand it. You can't go anywhere without meeting clever people. It's becoming quite a public nuisance. I wish to goodness we had some fools left.
Oh, we have.
The fools? What do they talk about?
The fools? Oh, they talk about clever people, of course.
What fools?
By the way, did you tell Gwendolyn about your being Earnest in the city and Jack in the country?
My dear fellow, the truth isn't quite the sort of thing that one just tells to a extraordinarily kind and sweet-natured girl such as Gwendolyn. You have very interesting ideas about how to behave to a woman.
The only way to behave to a woman is to make love to her if she is pretty, and to someone else if she is plain.
That's nonsense.
What about your brother? What about the profligate Earnest?
Oh, before the end of the week, I shall have got rid of him. I'll say that he died in Paris of apoplexy. Lots of people die of apoplexy quite suddenly, don't they?
Yes, but it's hereditary, my dear fellow. It's the sort of thing that runs in families. You'd be much better off saying he died of severe chill.
And you're quite sure that a severe chill is not hereditary?
Of course it isn't.
Very well then. My brother Ernest is carried off in Paris of a severe chill. That gets rid of him.
But I thought you said that Cecily was a little too attached to Ernest. Won't she feel his loss a great deal?
That's all right. Cecily's not a silly romantic girl. I'm glad to say that she has a very healthy appetite, goes on long walks, and pays no attention to her studies.
I would quite like to meet Cecily.
Well, I will take very good care that you don't. She's excessively pretty and only just 18.
Have you told Gwendolyn yet that you have an excessively pretty ward who is only just 18?
One does not blurt these things out. Cecily and Gwendolyn will be perfectly good friends within an hour of meeting each other. I bet you anything that they'll be calling each other sister.
Women only do that after they've called each other many other things beforehand. Now, if we want to get a good table at Willis's, we really must go and dress. Do you realize it is almost nearly 7?
Oh, it's always almost nearly 7.
Well, I'm hungry.
Well, I never knew you when you weren't.
What shall we do after dinner? Go to the theater?
No, I hate listening.
Well, we could go to the club.
No, I loathe talking.
Then, we could trot around to the Empire around 10.
No, I can't bear to look at things. It's so silly.
Then what shall we do?
Nothing.
It's awfully hard work doing nothing. However, I don't mind hard work as long as there's no definite object of any kind.
Miss Fairfax.
Gwendolyn, upon my word.
Algernon, kindly turn around. I have something I wish to say to Mr. Worthing.
Really, Gwendolyn, I don't know if I can allow this at all.
You always adopt a strictly immoral attitude towards life, and I don't think you're quite old enough to do so.
My darling.
My darling Ernest, I fear that we will never be married. And from the expression on Mamma's face, I suppose we never shall. Few parents nowadays have any regard for what their children have to say to them. The old-fashioned respect for the young is fast dying out, and I'm afraid any hold I once had over Mamma, I lost at the age of 3. And although we may never be wed, and I may marry someone else and marry often, nothing that she can possibly do can ever alter my eternal devotion to you.
My darling.
The story of your romantic origin, as relayed to me by Mamma through unpleasant comments, has stirred the deeper fibers of my nature. Your Christian name has always had an irresistible confidence in it, but the simplicity of your character makes you exquisitely incomprehensible to me. Your address in the city I have. What's your address in the country?
135 Middle Neck Road, Long Island.
There's good telephone service there, I suppose. It may become necessary to do something drastic. That, of course, will require serious consideration, but I'll communicate with you daily.
Gwendolyn.
How long do you remain in the city?
Till Monday.
Good. Algernon, you may turn around now.
Thank you, but I've already turned around already.
Ring the bell.
I'm afraid that. Let me allow me to walk you to your car.
Certainly.
Yes, sir.
I will take Miss Fairfax to her car.
Yes, sir.
A glass of sherry, Lane.
Yes, sir.
Tomorrow, Lane. I'm going bunburying.
Yes, sir.
I shall probably not be back till Monday. You can put up my dress clothes and my smoking jacket and the Bunbury suits.
Yes, sir.
I hope tomorrow will be a fine day, Lane.
It never is, sir.
Lane, you're a perfect pessimist.
I do my best to give satisfaction, sir.
There's a sensible, intellectual girl. The only girl I ever met that I would marry. What are you so amused at?
Oh, I'm just a little worried about Bunbury, that's all.
If you don't take care of your friend Bunbury, you'll get into a serious scrape someday.
Oh, I love scrapes. They're the only thing that are never serious.
That is nonsense. You're never speaking anything but nonsense.
Nobody ever does. Hello again. We're going to jump forward a few days to Jack's lovely country house on Long Island to meet his ward Cecily and her tutor, Miss Prism. There are lots of surprises in store. See you there.
Cecily, surely such utilitarian occupation as the watering of flowers is rather the gardener's duty than yours, especially at a moment when intellectual pleasures await you. Your German grammar's on the table. Please open it at page 15. We will repeat yesterday's lesson.
But I don't like German. It isn't at all a becoming language. I know perfectly well I look quite plain after my German lesson.
Child, you know how anxious your guardian is that you should improve yourself in every way. He laid particular stress on your German as he was leaving for town yesterday. Indeed, he always lays stress on your German as he's leaving for town.
Dear Uncle Jack is always so very serious. Sometimes he's so serious that I think he can't be quite well.
Your guardian enjoys the best of health, and his gravity of demeanor is especially to be commended in one so comparatively young as he is. I know no one who has a higher sense of duty and responsibility.
I suppose that's why he always looks a little bored when the three of us are together.
Cecily, I'm surprised at you. Mr. Worthing has many troubles in his life. Idle merriment and triviality would be out of place in his conversation. You must remember his constant anxiety about that unfortunate young man, his brother.
I wish Uncle Jack would allow that unfortunate young man, his brother, to come down here sometimes. We could have a good influence over him, Miss Prism. I mean, I'm sure you certainly would. You know, German and geology and things of that kind influence a man very much.
I do not think that even I could produce any effect on a character that, according to his own brother's admission, is irretrievably weak and vacillating. Indeed, I don't think that I would desire to reclaim him. I'm not in favor of this modern mania for turning bad people into good people at a moment's notice. As a man sows, so let him reap. You must put away your diary, Cecily. I really don't see why you should keep a diary at all.
I keep a diary in order to enter the wonderful things of my life. If I didn't write them down, I should probably forget all about them.
Memory, my dear Cecily, is the diary that we all carry about with us.
Yes, but it also chronicles things that have never happened and couldn't possibly have happened. I believe that memory is responsible for nearly all 3-volume novels that Moody sends us.
Do not speak slightingly of the 3-volume novel, Cecily. I wrote one myself in earlier days.
Did you really, Miss Prism? Oh, how wonderfully clever you are. I hope it did not end happily. I don't quite like novels that end happily. They depress me so much.
The good ended happily and the bad unhappily. That is what fiction means.
Yes, I suppose so. And was your novel ever published?
Alas, no. The manuscript, unfortunately, was abandoned. I used the word in a sense of lost or mislaid. To your work, child. These speculations are possible.
But I see dear Dr. Chasuble coming up the garden.
Dr. Chasuble! This is indeed a pleasure.
And how are we this morning? Miss Prism, you are, I trust, well.
Miss Prism has just been complaining of a slight headache. You know, I think it would do her so much good to have a short stroll in the park with you, Dr. Chasuble.
Cecily, I've not mentioned anything about headache.
Oh, I know that, dear Miss Prism, but I felt it instinctively that you had a headache. In fact, I was thinking about that and not my German lesson when the rector came in.
I hope, Cecily, you are not inattentive.
Oh, I'm afraid I am.
That is strange. Were I fortunate enough to be Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her lips. I spoke metaphorically. My metaphor was drawn from bees. Mr. Worthing, I suppose, has not returned from town yet.
We do not expect him till Monday afternoon.
Ah, yes. He usually likes to spend his Sundays in Manhattan. He's not one of those whose sole aim is enjoyment, as, by all accounts, that unfortunate young man, his brother, seems to be. But I must not disturb Egeria and her people any longer.
Egeria? My name is Letitia, Doctor.
A classical allusion merely, drawn from the pagan authors. I shall see you both no doubt at evensong.
I think, dear Doctor, I will have a stroll with you. I find I have a headache after all, and a walk might do it good.
With pleasure, Miss Prism, with pleasure. We might go as far as the schools and back.
That'd be delightful. Cecily, you will read your political economy in my absence. The chapter on the fall of the rupee you may omit. It is somewhat too sensational. Even these metallic problems have their melodramatic side.
Horrid political economy, horrid geography, horrid German.
And Mr. Ernest Worthing has just driven in from the station. He has brought his luggage with him.
Mr. Ernest Worthing, the Albany. Uncle Jack's brother. Did you tell him Mr. Worthing was in the city?
Yes, miss. He seemed very much disappointed. I mentioned that you and Miss Prism were in the garden. He said he was anxious to speak with you privately for a moment.
Ask Mr. Ernest Worthing to come out here. And I suppose you should talk to the housekeeper about a room for him?
Yes, miss.
I've never met a truly wicked person before. I'm rather frightened. I'm so afraid he's going to look just like everyone else. And he does.
You are my little cousin Cecily, I'm sure.
You're under some strange mistake. I'm not little. In fact, I think I'm more than usually tall for my age. But I am your cousin Cecily. You, I see from your card, are my cousin Ernest. My wicked cousin Ernest.
Oh, I'm not really wicked at all, Cecily. You mustn't think that I am wicked.
Well, if you're not, then you've certainly been deceiving us all in a very inexcusable manner. I hope you haven't been going around pretending to be really bad and really good all in one go. That'd be hypocrisy.
Of course, I have been rather reckless.
I'm glad to hear it.
In fact, now that you mention the subject, I have been very bad in my own small way.
I don't think you should be quite so proud of that, but I'm sure it was very pleasant.
It is much pleasanter being here with you.
I can't understand how you're here at all. Uncle Jack won't be back till Wednesday afternoon. Or Monday afternoon, my apologies.
I'm obliged to go back on the first train on Monday, so that's a great disappointment. I have a business appointment that I'm anxious to miss.
Oh, couldn't you miss it anywhere but here?
No. The business appointment is over in Manhattan, so I'm afraid I couldn't stay here.
Still, I think you'd better wait for Uncle Jack to arrive. I know he wanted to talk to you about your emigrating.
About my what?
You're emigrating. He'd gone up to buy you an outfit.
Well, I certainly wouldn't let Jack buy me an outfit. He has no taste in neckties at all.
I don't think it require neckties where you're going. Uncle Jack is sending you to Canada.
Canada? I'd sooner die.
Well, he said on Wednesday night at dinner that you would have to choose between this world, the next world, and Canada.
Oh, well, the accounts I have had of the next world and Canada are not particularly encouraging. This world is good enough for me, Cousin Cecily.
Yes, but are you good enough for it?
I'm afraid I'm not that. Which is why I'd like you to reform me. You might make that your mission if you don't mind, Cousin Cecily.
I'm afraid I've no time this afternoon.
Well, would you mind my reforming myself?
I think it's rather quixotic of you, but I also think you should try.
I will. I feel better already.
You're looking a little worse.
That is because I'm hungry.
Oh, how thoughtless of me. I should have known that one's going to lead an entirely new life. One requires regular and wholesome meals. Won't you come in?
Thank you. You are the prettiest girl I have ever seen.
Miss Prism says all good looks are a snare.
Well, they are a snare that any sensible man would love to be caught in.
Oh, I don't think I'd care to catch a sensible man. I shouldn't know what to talk to him about.
You are too much alone, dear Dr. Chasuble. You should get married. A misanthrope I can understand. A womanthrope never.
Believe me, I do not deserve so neologistic a phrase. The precept as well as the practice of the primitive church was distinctly against matrimony.
That is obviously the reason why the primitive church has not lasted up to the present day. And you do not seem to realize, dear doctor, that by persistently remaining single, a man converts himself into a permanent public temptation. Men should be more careful. His very celibacy leads weaker vessels astray.
But is a man not equally attractive when married?
No married man is ever attractive, except to his wife.
And often, I've been told, not even to her.
That depends on the intellectual sympathies of the woman. Maturity can always be depended on. Ripeness can be trusted. Young women are green. I spoke horticulturally. My metaphor was drawn from fruit. But where is Cecily?
Perhaps she followed us to the schools.
Mr. Worthing?
Mr. Worthing?
This is indeed a surprise. We did not look for you till Monday afternoon.
I have returned earlier than I expected. You are well, I hope, Dr. Chasuble?
Dear Mr. Worthing, I trust this jarb of woe does not betoken some terrible calamity.
My brother.
More shameful debts and extravagance.
Still leading his life of pleasure?
Dead. Sorry to leave you on a cliffhanger, but we're going to take our intermission here. Feel free to get some refreshments, and please join us for Act 2, where we will finally straighten this all out. Welcome back to the DY Theater Company's second act of The Importance of Being Earnest. We are still at Jack's place in the country. On with the show.
Your brother Ernest dead?
Quite dead.
What a lesson for him. I trust he'll profit by it.
Mr. Worthing, I offer you my sincere condolence. You have at least the consolation of knowing that you are always the most generous and forgiving of brothers.
Poor Ernest. He had many faults, but his death is a sad, sad blow.
Very sad indeed. Were you with him at the end?
No, he died abroad in Paris. In fact, I had a telegram from the manager of the Grand Hotel last night.
Was the cause of death mentioned?
No, a severe chill, it seems.
As a man sows, so shall he reap.
Charity, dear Miss Prism, charity. None of us are perfect. I myself am susceptible to drafts. Will the interment take place here?
No, he expressed a desire to be buried in Paris.
In Paris. I fear that hardly points to any very serious state of mind at the last. You would no doubt wish me to make some slight allusion to the tragic domestic affliction next Sunday. My sermon on the meaning of the manna in the wilderness can be adapted to almost any occasion, joyful or, in the present case, distressing. I have preached it at harvest celebrations, christenings, confirmations, on days of humiliation and festal days. The last time I delivered it was at the cathedral as a charity sermon on behalf of the WCTU, you know, the Women's Christian Temperance Union. The bishop who was present was much struck by some of the analogies I drew.
That reminds me, Dr. Chasuble, you do know how to christen. Of course, you're continually christening, aren't you?
It is, I regret to say, one of the rector's most constant duties in this parish. I've often spoken to the poorer classes on the subject, but they don't seem to know what thrift is.
But is there any particular infant in whom you're interested, Mr. Worthing? Your brother was, I believe, unmarried, was he not?
Oh, yes.
People who live entirely for pleasure usually are.
But it is not for any child. No. I am afraid that I would wish to be christened. Today, if you have nothing better to do.
But surely, Mr. Worthing, you have been christened already.
I don't have any memory of the fact.
But have you any grave doubts on the subject?
Oh, well, I certainly intend to have. Of course, I don't know if the thing will bother you in any way. If you think I'm a little too old.
Not at all. The sprinkling and indeed the immersion of adults is a perfectly canonical practice.
Immersion?
You need have no apprehensions. Sprinkling is all that is necessary, or indeed, I think, advisable. Our weather is so changeable. At what hour would you wish the ceremony performed?
One might trot round about 5.
Perfectly, perfectly. In fact, I have 2 similar ceremonies to perform at that time. A case of twins that occurred recently in one of your outlining estates. Poor Jenkins the butcher, a most hardworking man.
Oh, I don't see much fun in being christened alongside babies. I find it quite childish. Would 5:30 do?
Admirably, admirably. And now, dear Mr. Worthing, I will not intrude any longer into a house of sorrow. I'd merely beg you not to be too much bowed down by grief. What seems to us bitter trials are often blessings in disguise.
This seems to me a blessing of an extremely obvious kind.
Uncle Jack! Oh, am I so pleased to see you back. But what horrid clothes you've got on. Do go and change them.
Sweet.
My child, my child.
What's the matter, Uncle Jack? You look as if you've got a toothache, and I've got such a surprise for you. Who do you think is in the dining room right now?
Who?
It's your brother.
My brother? But I haven't got a brother.
Oh, don't say that. However badly he may have treated you in the past, he is still your brother. You couldn't be so heartless as to just disown him. You know what? I'll tell him to come out, and you will shake hands with him, won't you, Uncle Jack?
These are very joyful tidings.
After we had all been resigned to his sudden loss, his return seems to me peculiarly distressing.
My brother's in the dining room. I don't know what all this means, but I find it perfectly absurd. Good heavens!
Brother John, I have come back from the city to tell you that I am very sorry for all the trouble I have caused you, and that I intend to lead a better life in the future.
Uncle Jack, you're not going to refuse your brother's hand.
Nothing will induce me to take his hand. I find his coming here quite disgraceful, and you know perfectly well why.
Uncle Jack, do be nice. There's some good in everyone. Ernest has just been telling me all about his poor invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, who has terribly bad health, who he goes to visit so often. And surely there must be so much good in someone who leaves the luxuries of Manhattan to sit beside a bed of pain.
Oh, he's been talking about Bunbury, has he? Well, I won't have him talk to you about Bunbury or about anything else. It's enough to drive anyone frantic.
Of course, I admit that the faults were all on my side, but I must say I find that Brother John's coldness to me is peculiarly painful. I expected a more enthusiastic welcome, especially considering that this is the first time I've ever come here.
Uncle Jack, if you don't shake hands with Ernest, I will never forgive you.
Never forgive me?
Never, never, never!
Well, this is the only time I shall ever be induced to do so again.
I'll leave you two alone.
You young scoundrel. Algy, you must get out of here at once. I don't allow any Bunburying here.
I've unpacked Mr. Earnest's things and put them in the room next to your own. I suppose that is all right, sir.
What?
Mr. Earnest's luggage, sir. I've unpacked it and put it in the room next to yours.
His luggage?
Yes, sir. 3 portmanteaus, 2 hat boxes, and a large luncheon basket.
I'm afraid I can't stay more than a week this time.
Merriman, call a taxi. Mr. Worthing has just been called back to the city quite suddenly.
Yes, sir.
What a fearful liar you are, Jack. I have not been called back to anywhere.
Yes, you have.
Well, I have not heard anyone call me.
Your duty as a gentleman calls you.
My duty as a gentleman has never interfered with my pleasures in the slightest degree.
I can certainly understand that.
Well, Cecily is a darling.
I will not have you talking about Cecily in that way. I don't like it.
Well, I don't like your clothes. You look perfectly ridiculous in them. Why on earth don't you go up and change?
Well, if I go change, will you leave?
Yes, but if you are not too long about it. I've never seen anyone take so long to change and with such little result.
Well, it's better than being always overdressed as you are.
If I am occasionally a little overdressed, I make up for it by always being immensely overeducated.
Algernon, your vanity is ridiculous, your conduct an outrage, and your presence in my garden utterly absurd. However, you've got to catch the 4-5, and I hope you'll have a pleasant journey back to the city. This bunburying, as you call it, has not been a very good success, has it?
I think it's been a great success. I'm in love with Cecily, and that is everything. But I must see her before I go and make plans for another Bunbury. Ah, here she is.
Oh, I really came back to get my diary. I thought you were with Uncle Jack.
No, he's gone to call the taxi for me.
Oh, is he going to take you on a tour?
He's going to send me away.
Then we've got to part?
I'm afraid so. It's a very painful parting.
Well, it's always painful parting from one whom one has known for so brief amount of time. The absence of old friends one can endure with equanimity, but even a momentary separation from anyone whom one has just been introduced to is almost unbearable.
Thank you.
The taxi is waiting at the door, sir.
It can wait, Merriman, for 5 minutes.
Yes, miss.
I hope that I do not offend you, Cecily, if I state quite frankly and openly that you seem to me to be the visible personification of absolute perfection.
I think your frankness does you great credit, Ernest. If you'd allow me, I'd love to copy your remarks down in my diary.
Do you really keep a diary? Oh, I'd give anything to look at it. May I?
Oh, no. I couldn't possibly. You see, it's merely a young girl's record of her own thoughts and impressions of the modern world around her, and consequently meant for publication. I do hope when it comes out in volume form you'll order a copy. But please, Ernest, don't stop. I delight in taking down from dictation. I've reached absolute perfection. You can go on. I'm quite ready for more. Ernest, don't cough. When one's dictating, one should be fluent and not cough. Besides, I don't know how to write a cough.
Cecily, ever since I first laid eyes upon your wonderful and incomparable beauty, I have dared to love you wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly.
I don't think that you should say that you love me wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly. Hopelessly doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, does it?
Cecily.
The taxi is waiting at the door, sir.
Tell it to come round next week at the same hour.
Yes, sir.
Uncle Jack would be very annoyed if he knew you were staying on till next week at the same hour.
Oh, I don't care about Jack. I don't care about anyone in the world but you, Cecily. I love you. You will marry me, won't you?
Why, of course. Well, we've already been engaged for the last 3 months.
For the last 3 months?
Yes, it'll be exactly 3 months on Thursday.
But how did we become engaged?
Well, ever since dear Uncle Jack first confessed to me that he had a younger brother who was very wicked and bad, you, of course, have become the chief topic of conversation between myself and Miss Prism. And one who's talked about is always very attractive. One feels there must be something in him, after all. I dare say it was foolish of me, but I fell in love with you, Ernest.
Darling. And when was the engagement actually settled?
On the 14th of February last. Worn out by your entire ignorance of my existence, I just resolved to set out the matter one way or another. And after a long battle within myself, I finally accepted you under this dear old tree here. The next day, I went out and I bought this ring in your name. And I bought this bangle with the true lover's knot, which I promised you to always wear.
Did I get you those? They're very pretty, aren't they?
Yes, you have wonderful taste. I suppose that's always the excuse I've given you for you leading such a bad life. Oh, and here is the box in which I keep your letters.
My letters? But, my own dear sweet Cecily, I never wrote you any letters.
Oh, you need hardly remind me of that, Ernest. I only remember all too well that I was forced to write your letters for you. I wrote 3 times a week and sometimes oftener.
Oh, do let me read them, Cecily.
Oh, I couldn't possibly. They'd make you far too conceited. Well, the ones you wrote me after I had first broken off the engagement were so beautiful and so badly misspelled that I could hardly read them without crying a little.
But was our engagement ever broken off?
Of course it was. On the 22nd of last March. You can see the entry if you'd like. Here it is. Today I broke off my engagement with Earnest. I feel it's better to do so. The weather still continues charming.
But why on earth did you break it off? What had I done? I had not done anything. I am very hurt, Cecily, to hear that you broke off our engagement, particularly when the weather was so charming.
Well, it would have hardly been a really serious engagement if it hadn't been broken off at least once. Besides, I forgave you before the week was out.
Oh, what an angel you are, Cecily.
You dear romantic boy. I hope your hair curls naturally, does it?
It does, with a little help from some others.
I'm so glad.
Cecily, you'll never break off our engagement again.
I don't think I could now that I've actually met you. Besides, there's the matter of your name.
Yes, of course.
You mustn't laugh, darling, but it's always been a girlish fantasy of mine to love someone of the name of Earnest. There's something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. I pity any poor married woman who's married to somebody that's not named Earnest.
But, my own child, do you mean to say that you could not love me if my name wasn't Earnest?
But what name?
Oh, any name you like. Algernon, for instance.
But I don't like the name of Algernon.
But, my own dear sweet Cecily, there's really no reason at all why you should select the name of Algernon. It's a perfectly wonderful name. But, seriously, Cecily, if my name was Algie, couldn't you love me?
I might respect you, Ernest. I might even admire your character. But I'm afraid I couldn't give you my full, undivided attention.
Cecily, your rector here is, I presume, thoroughly experienced with all the rites and rituals of the church?
Oh yes, Dr. Chasuble is a most learned man. He's never written a single book, so you can imagine how much he knows.
I must see him on a very important christening. A very important business.
Oh,
I won't be gone for more than a half an hour.
seeing as we've only met for the first time today and that we've been engaged for the past 3 months, I feel it's a little hard for you to leave me for such a long period as half an hour. Couldn't you make it 20 minutes?
I'll be back in no time.
What an impetuous boy he is. I must write down his remarks in my diary.
A Miss Fairfax has just called in requesting to speak with Mr. Ernest Worthing on very important business, Miss Fairfax states.
Isn't Mr. Worthing in his library?
I believe he went in the direction of the rectory some time ago.
Well, tell the lady to come out here. I'm sure Mr. Worthing will be back soon. And you can bring tea.
Yes, Miss.
Miss Fairfax. I'm sure she's one of the more philanthropic women that Uncle Jack associates himself with. I don't quite like women that are interested in philanthropics. I think it's so forward of them.
Miss Fairfax.
Oh, please let me introduce myself to you. My name is Cecily Cardew.
Cecily Cardew. What a very sweet name. I think we're going to be great friends. I like you already more than I can say, and my first impressions of people are never wrong.
How nice of you to like me so much after we've only just met. Please, tell me about yourself.
I may call you Cecily, may I not?
Oh, if you like.
And you will call me Gwendolyn, won't you?
Of course.
Then that's all quite settled, is it not?
I hope so.
Perhaps this would be a good time for my mentioning who I am. My father, Mr. Bracknell. You've never heard of Papa, I suppose?
I don't think so.
Well, I'm glad to say that outside of the family circle, Papa is entirely unknown. Cecily, Mamma, whose views on education are remarkably strict, has brought me up to be short-sighted. It's part of the system. Would you mind if I look at you through my glasses?
Oh, go right ahead. I admire being looked at.
You're here on a short visit, I suppose?
Oh, no, I live here.
Then your mother, no doubt, or some female relative of advanced years resides here also?
Oh, no. I actually don't have a mother, or in fact any relations.
Indeed.
Mr. Worthing, with the help of Miss Prism, have the arduous task of looking after me.
And how are you related to Mr. Worthing?
He is my guardian.
Oh, Mr. Worthing never mentioned to me he had a ward. How secretive of him. It grows more interesting hourly. Although I'm not sure that the news inspires me with feelings of unmixed delight. I'm very fond of you, Cecily. I've liked you since I first met you, but now that I know that you're Mr. Worthing's ward, I cannot help expressing a wish you were, well, a little older than you appear to be and not quite so alluring in appearance. In fact, if I may speak candidly.
Oh, please do. I feel whenever anyone has anything negative to say, one should always be quite candid.
Well, then to speak with perfect candor, Cecily, I wish that you were fully 42, and more than usually plain for your age. Ernest has a strong, upright nature. He's the very soul of truth and honor. Deception to him would be as impossible as disloyalty. But even men, with the noblest possible moral character, are susceptible to the physical charms of others. Modern, no less than ancient history, supplies us with many most painful examples of what I refer to. Indeed, if it were not so, I suppose history would be quite unreadable.
I'm so sorry, Gwendolyn, but did you say Ernest?
Yes.
Oh, but it's not Mr. Ernest Worthing who's my guardian. It's his brother, his elder brother.
Ernest never mentioned to me he had a brother.
I'm sorry to say they've not exactly been on good terms for quite some time.
Oh, well, that explains it. And to think of it, I can't recall a man ever mentioning his brother in my presence. The subject seems distasteful to most men. You have lifted a load from my mind, Cecily. I was growing almost anxious, and it would have been terrible if any cloud had come across a friendship like ours, would it not? Although you are quite sure it is not Mr. Earnest Worthing who's your guardian?
Quite sure. In fact, I'm going to be his.
I beg your pardon?
Dearest Gwendolyn, there's no reason why I should keep it a secret to you. Our little county newspaper is sure to display the fact next week. Mr. Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
There must be some slight error, Cecily. Mr. Ernest Worthing is engaged to me. The announcement will appear in the Morning Post Saturday at the latest.
You must be under some misconception. Ernest proposed to me exactly 10 minutes ago.
That certainly is quite curious. Mr. Worthing asked me to be his wife yesterday afternoon at 5:30. If you care to verify the incident, pray do so. I never travel anywhere without my diary. One always needs something sensational to read on the train. I'm so sorry, dear Cecily, if it is any disappointment to you, but I'm afraid that I have the prior claim.
It would distress me more than I can tell you, dearest Gwendolyn, if it caused you any mental or physical anguish, but I do have to bring up the fact that since Ernest proposed to you, he's clearly changed his mind.
If the boy has entrapped himself into any foolish engagement, I shall consider it my duty to rescue him at once, and with a firm hand.
Whatever unfortunate entanglement my boy may have gotten himself into, I'll never reproach him with it after we're married.
Do you allude to me, Miss Cardew, as an entanglement? You are presumptuous. In matters such as these, it becomes more than a moral duty to speak one's mind. It becomes a pleasure.
Do you suggest, Miss Fairfax, that I entrapted Ernest into an engagement? How dare you? This is no time for the mild mask of manners. When I see a spade, I call it a spade.
I'm glad to see I've never seen a spade. It appears our social spheres have been widely different.
Shall I lay the tea here as usual, miss?
Yes, as usual.
Are there many interesting walks in the vicinity, Miss Cardew?
Oh, yes. Just down the road from here up on a hill, you can see almost 5 counties.
5 counties? I don't think I should like that. I hate crowds.
Oh, I suppose that's why you live in Manhattan?
What a well-kept garden this is, Miss Cardew.
So glad you like it, Miss Fairfax.
I had no idea that there were flowers in the country.
Oh, flowers, Miss Fairfax, are as common here as people are in Manhattan.
I have no idea how anyone resides in the country. If anybody who is anybody does. The country always bores me to death.
Tea, Miss Fairfax?
Thank you. Detestable girl. But I require tea.
Sugar?
No, thank you. Sugar is not fashionable anymore.
Right. Cake or bread and butter?
Bread and butter, please. Cake is rarely seen at the best houses nowadays.
Hand that to Miss Fairfax.
You have filled my tea with lumps of sugar. I most distinctly asked for bread and butter. You have given me cake. I am known for the gentleness of my disposition and the extraordinary sweetness of my nature, but I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far.
To save my poor, sweet, innocent, trusting boy from the machinations of any other woman, there is to no lengths of which I would not go.
From the moment I met you, I felt that you were false and deceitful. I'm never deceived in such matters. My first impressions of people are invariably right.
It seems to me, Miss Fairfax, that I am trespassing on your very valuable time. Oh, surely you have many other calls of a similar nature to make in the vicinity?
Ernest! Oh, my darling Ernest!
Gwendolyn, darling.
A moment. May I ask, are you engaged to be married to this young lady?
To little Cecily? Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you.
I knew there must be some misconception, Miss Fairfax. The gentleman standing at your side right now is, in fact, my guardian, Mr. John Worthing.
I beg your pardon?
This is Uncle Jack.
Jack? Oh.
Here is Ernest.
My own love.
Just a moment, Ernest. Could you answer me this question? Are you engaged to be married to this young woman?
Good heavens, to Gwendolyn.
Yes, good heavens, to Gwendolyn. To Gwendolyn.
Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you.
I felt that there must be some slight error, Cecily. The man who is at present at your side is not Mr. Ernest Worthing, but is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrief.
Algernon Moncrief? Oh. Are you called Algernon?
I cannot deny it.
Oh.
Is your name really John?
Well, I could deny it if I liked, but I could deny anything if I liked, but my name certainly is John. It has been John for many years.
A gross deception has been passed between the both of us.
My poor wounded Cecily.
My sweet wrong Gwendolyn.
You will call me sister, will you not?
There's just one question I'd like to be allowed to ask my guardian.
An admirable idea. Mr. Worthing? Where is your brother Ernest? It seems to me that the both of us are engaged to your brother Ernest. It is of some importance for us to know where he is at present.
Gwendolyn, Cecily, it is very painful for me to be forced to speak the truth. It's the first time in my life that I've ever been reduced to such a painful position. And I'm really quite inexperienced in doing anything of the kind. But I will tell you quite frankly that I have no brother Ernest. I have no brother at all. I have never had a brother in my life, and I certainly do not intend to have a brother in the future.
No brother at all?
None.
Have you never had a brother of any kind?
Never. Not even of any kind.
It seems to me that neither of us is engaged to be married to anybody.
It's not a very pleasant position for a young girl to find herself in, is it?
Come, let's go up to the house. They can hardly be expected to follow us up there.
No, men are so cowardly, aren't they?
Well, the only small satisfaction I have in this whole horrid ordeal is that your friend Bunbury is quite exploded. You won't be able to get down to the city as often as you used to. Dear Algie.
Your brother is looking a little under the weather, isn't he, dear Jack? You won't be able to disappear up to Manhattan quite so frequently as your wicked custom once was, and not a bad thing either.
As for your conduct towards Miss Cardew, I must say that your taking in a sweet, innocent girl such as her is quite inexcusable, not to say anything of the fact that she's my ward.
And I can see no possible defense at all for your deceiving of a brilliant, clever, thoroughly experienced young lady such as Miss Fairfax, to say nothing of the fact that she is my cousin.
I only wished to marry Gwendolyn. That's all. I love her.
Well, I wish to be married to Cecily. I adore her.
Well, I don't think there's much chance of that happening.
Oh, I do not see you and Miss Fairfax becoming engaged in the near future.
Well, that's none of your business.
Well, if it was my business, I wouldn't talk about it. It is very vulgar to talk about one's business. Only people like stockbrokers do that, and even then merely at dinner parties.
How can you sit there calmly eating muffins in a time like this? I can't make it out. You seem to me perfectly heartless.
When I eat muffins, I always meet them in a very calm manner. One can't very much eat muffins in an agitated manner. I should probably get the butter all over my cuffs.
Well, there's no reason you should eat them all in that greedy way.
But you said yourself, it was perfectly heartless to be eating muffins.
I said it's perfectly heartless of you, under the circumstances. That's quite a different thing.
That may be, but the muffins are the same.
Algie, I wish you would go. Why don't you go?
You can't possibly ask me to go without having some dinner. Nobody ever goes without their dinner. It's absurd. Only people like vegetarians do that. Besides, I've just made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 5:45 under the name of Earnest.
My dear fellow, the sooner you give up that nonsense, the better. I have myself made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 5:30, and naturally I will take the name of Earnest, as Gwendolyn would wish it. And we can't both be christened Earnest. That would be absurd. Besides, I have the perfect right to be christened if I'd liked. I've never been christened, and Dr. Chasuble thinks that I probably never was. So I can be christened, and you've already been christened, so you can't.
Yes, but I have not been christened in many years.
But you have been christened, and that's the important thing.
Quite so. So, I know my constitution can stand it. If you are not sure about your ever having been christened, I should think it quite dangerous to venture upon the thing now. It might make you very unwell. You can hardly have forgotten that someone very near to you was very nearly carried off this week by a severe chill.
But you yourself said that a severe chill was not hereditary.
It used to be, but I dare say it is now.
That's nonsense. You're always talking nonsense.
Jack, you are at the muffins again. I wish you wouldn't. I told you, I am particularly fond of muffins.
But I hate tea cake.
Then why on earth do you allow tea cake to be served at your own establishment? What ideas you have of hospitality.
Algernon, I have already told you to go. Why don't you go? I don't want you here.
Well, there's still one muffin left, and I haven't quite finished it yet.
fact that they did not follow us up here, as anyone else would have, shows that they do have some small sense of shame left.
They've been eating muffins. That looks like repentance.
They haven't even noticed us. Couldn't you cough?
But I haven't a cough.
Now they're looking at us. What effrontery.
They're approaching. That's very forward of them.
We must preserve a dignified silence.
Certainly. It's the only thing to do now.
This dignified silence has quite an unpleasant air about it.
A most distasteful one.
But still, we will not be the first to speak.
Certainly not.
Mr. Worthing, I have something quite particular to put upon you, and much depends on your reply.
Gwendolyn, your common sense is invaluable. Mr. Moncrief, kindly answer me the following question. Why did you pretend to be my guardian's brother?
In order that I may have the opportunity of meeting you.
That certainly seems like a satisfactory explanation, does it not?
Of course, darling, if you can believe him.
I don't, but that doesn't change the wonderful beauty of his answer.
True. In matters of great importance, style, not sincerity, is the vital thing. Mr. Worthing, may I inquire as to why you pretended to have a brother? Was it perhaps so that you might have the opportunity of coming up to the city to see me as often as possible?
Can you doubt it, Miss Fairfax?
I have the gravest doubts on the subject, but I intend to crush them. This is no time for human skepticism. Your answers seem quite satisfactory, especially Mr. Worthing's, which seems to have the stamp of truth upon it.
I'm more than content with what Mr. Moncrief said. His words himself seem to have a stamp of absolute credulity.
Should we forgive them then?
Yeah. I mean, no.
True. I had forgotten. There are principles at stake that one cannot abandon. Which one of us should tell them? The task is not a pleasant one. Your Christian names
Are still an insurmountable barrier.
That is all.
Our Christian names, is that all?
But we are going to be christened this afternoon.
For my sake? You're willing to do this terrible thing?
I am.
To please me, you're ready to face this fearful ordeal?
I am.
How absurd to talk about the equality of the sexes. Where matters of self-sacrifice are concerned, men are indefinitely beyond us.
We are.
They have moments of physical courage of which we women know absolutely nothing about.
Darling.
Darling.
Madam Bracknell!
Good heavens!
Gwendolyn, what does this all mean?
I'm engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Come here. Hesitation of any kind is a sign of mental decay in the young, of physical decay in the old. Apprised, sir, of my daughter's sudden flight by her trusty maid, whose confidence I purchased by means of a small coin, I followed her at once by a luggage train. Her unhappy father is, I am pleased to say, under the impression that she is attending a more than usually lengthy lecture at the university. I do not propose to undeceive him. Indeed, I have never undeceived him on any question. I would consider it wrong. But you must understand that all communication between yourself and my daughter must cease immediately. On this point, as on all points, I am firm.
I am engaged to be married to Gwendolyn, Madam Bracknell.
You are nothing of the kind, sir. And now, as regards Algernon. Algernon?
Yes, Aunt Augusta?
May I ask if it is in this house that your invalid friend Mr. Bunbury resides?
Oh, no. Bunbury is somewhere else at present. In fact, Bunbury is dead.
Dead? When did Mr. Bunbury die? His death must have been extremely sudden.
Oh, I killed Bunbury this afternoon. I mean, poor Bunbury died this afternoon.
Well, what did he die of?
Bunbury? Oh, he was quite exploded.
Exploded? Well, was he the victim of a revolutionary outrage? I wasn't aware that Mr. Bunbury was interested in social legislation. If so, then he is well punished for his morbidity.
My dear Aunt Augusta, I mean to say that he was found out. The doctors found out that Bunbury could not live. So he died. That is what I mean.
Well, it seems that he had great confidence in the words of his medical professionals, but I am glad that Mr. Bunbury made up his mind at the last for some definite course of action and acted under proper medical advice. Now that we have finally gotten rid of this Mr. Bunbury, may I ask, Mr. Worthing, who is it that my nephew Algernon is gazing at in what seems to me a peculiar and unnecessary manner?
That lady is Miss Cecily Cardew, my ward.
I'm engaged to be married to Cecily, Aunt Augusta.
I beg your pardon?
Mr. Moncrief and I are engaged to be married, Madame Bracknell.
I do not know whether there is anything peculiar and exciting in the air of this particular part of Long Island, but the number of engagements that goes on here seems to me well above the proper average that statistics have laid out for our guidance. I assume some preliminary inquiry on my part would not be out of the question. Mr. Worthing, is Miss Cardew at all connected with any of the larger railway stations in New York? I merely desire information. Until yesterday, I had no idea that there were any families or persons whose origin was a terminus.
Miss Cecily Cardew is the granddaughter of Mr. Thomas Cardew of 16 Park Avenue, 135 Middle Neck Road, Long Island, and 16 Ochre Point, Newport.
That sounds not unsatisfactory. 3 addresses always inspire confidence, even in tradesmen. But what proof of their authenticity?
I have carefully preserved the deeds to the houses. They're open to your inspection, Madame Bracknell.
I have known strange discrepancies in deeds.
Miss Cardew's family lawyers are Messrs. Markby, and Markby.
Markby, and Markby, a firm of the very highest position in their profession. Indeed, I am told that one of the Mr. Markbys is occasionally to be seen at dinner parties. So far, I am satisfied.
How very gracious of you, Madame Bracknell. I also have, you will be very pleased to know, records of Miss Cardew's birth, baptism, vaccination, registration, confirmation, and her measles, both the English and the German variety.
Ah, a life crowded with incident, I see, although perhaps somewhat too exciting for that of a young girl. I myself am not in favor of premature experiences. Come, Gwendolen, the time approaches for our departure. We have not a moment to lose. As a matter of form, Mr. Worthing, I must ask if Miss Cardew has any little fortune.
Miss Cardew has, about $750,000 in the funds. That is all. Good day, Madame Bracknell. So pleased to have seen you.
A moment, Mr. Worthing. $750,000, and in the funds. Miss Cardew seems to me a most attractive young lady, now that I look at her. Few women of the modern age have any real qualities, or any of the qualities that last and improve over time. We live, I regret to say, in an age of surfaces. Come over here, dear. Pretty child, your dress is sadly simple, and your hair seems quite as nature might have left it. But we can soon alter all that. A thoroughly experienced French maid produces a really marvelous effect in quite a short amount of time. Indeed, I remember recommending one to young Mrs. Lansing, and after 3 months, her own husband did not recognize her.
And after 6 months, nobody recognized her.
Please show me your side view, dear child. Quite as I expected. There are distinct social possibilities in your profile. The 2 weak points in our age are his want of principle and his want of profile. The chin a little higher, dear. Style largely depends on the way the chin is worn, and they are worn very high just at present. Algernon?
Yes, Aunt Augusta?
There are distinct social possibilities in Miss Cardew's profile.
Cecily is the sweetest, dearest, prettiest girl in the whole world, and I don't give a plugged nickel about social possibilities.
Never speak disrespectfully of society, Algernon. Only the ones that can't get into it do that. Dear child, of course you know that Algernon has only his debts to depend upon. But I don't believe in mercenary marriages. When I married Mr. Bracknell, I had no fortune of any kind, and I never let that stand in my way for a moment. Well, I suppose I must give my consent.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Thank you, Madam Bracknell.
You may also call me Aunt Augusta for the future.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
The marriage, I think, had better take place quite soon.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
To be frank, I'm not in favor of long engagements. They give people the opportunity to find each other's character out before marriage, which I think is never advisable.
I beg your pardon, Madam Bracknell, but this marriage is absolutely out of the question. I am Miss Pardew's guardian, and as such, she cannot marry without my consent until she is of age, and that consent I absolutely decline to give.
Upon what grounds, may I ask? Algernon is extremely, might I say ostentatiously eligible young man. He looks nothing, but he has everything. What more can one desire?
It pains me very much to have to speak frankly to you, Madam Bracknell, but the truth is, I don't approve of his moral character. I fear that he is untruthful.
Untruthful? My nephew Algernon? Impossible! He went to Yale.
I fear that there can be no possible doubt about the matter. This afternoon, during my temporary absence in Manhattan, on an important question of romance, he obtained entrance to my house by means of the false pretense of being my brother. Under an assumed name, he drank, I've just been informed by my butler, a pint bottle of Perrier's Brut 89, a wine that I was specially reserving for myself. Continuing on his disgraceful deception, he, in the course of an afternoon, succeeded in alienating the affections of my only ward. He subsequently stayed to tea and devoured every single muffin in my garden. And what makes the matter all the worse is that he was perfectly well aware from the start that I have no brother, that I have never had a brother, and that I don't intend to have a brother, not even of any kind. I told him so myself yesterday afternoon.
Mr. Worthing, after careful consideration, I have decided entirely to overlook my nephew's conduct to you.
That is very, very generous of you, Madam Bracknell. My own decision, however, remains unalterable. I decline to give my consent.
Come here, sweet child. How old are you, dear?
Well, I'm really only 18, but I always admit to 20 at evening parties.
You are perfectly right in making some slight alteration. Indeed, I believe that no woman should ever give her real age. It looks so calculating. 18, but admitting to 20 at evening parties. Well, it will not be very long before you are of age and free from the restraints of tutelage. So I don't believe that your guardian's consent is, after all, a matter of any importance.
Pray excuse me, Madam Bracknell, but according to Miss Cardew's grandfather's will, she does not legally come of age until she is 35.
That does not seem to me to be a grave objection. 35 is a rather attractive age. American society is full of women of the highest birth who have remained 35 for years of their own accord. Mrs. Dumbleton is a case in point. Indeed, I think she has remained 35 ever since she arrived at the age of 40, which is many years ago now. So I don't see why our dear Miss Cecily would not still be more attractive at the age you mentioned. There will be a large accumulation of property.
Algie, could you wait for me until I was 35?
Of course I could, Cecily. You know I could.
Yes, I felt it instinctively, but I couldn't wait all that time. I hate waiting even 5 minutes for anybody. It always makes me rather cross. I'm not punctual myself, I know, but I do admire punctuality in others, and waiting, even to be married, is quite out of the question.
Then what is to be done, Cecily?
I don't know, Mr. Moncrief.
My dear Mr. Worthing, as Miss Cardew states perfectly that she cannot wait until she is 35, a remark which I'm bound to say reveals a rather impatient nature. I beg of you to reconsider your decision.
But my dear Madam Bracknell, the decision is entirely in your own hands. The moment you consent to a marriage between myself and Gwendolyn, I will be very happy to approve of a union between your nephew and my ward.
You must be quite aware that what you propose is out of the question.
Then a passionate celibacy is all that any of us can look forward to.
That is not the future I propose for Gwendolyn. Algernon, of course, can decide for himself. Come, dear, we've missed 5, if not 6 trains. To miss any more might expose us to comment on the platform.
Everything is quite ready for the christenings.
The christening, sir? Is that not somewhat premature?
Both these gentlemen have expressed a desire for immediate baptism.
At their age? The idea is grotesque and irreligious. Algernon, I forbid you to be baptized. I will not hear of such excesses. If Mr. Bracknell found out that this is the way you spent your time and money, he would be highly displeased.
Am I to understand then that there are no christenings at all this afternoon?
I don't think that, as things are now, it would be very much use to anyone.
I am grieved to hear such sentiments from you, Mr. Worthing. They savor of the heretical views of the Anabaptists, views that I have completely refuted in 4 of my unpublished sermons. However, as your present mood seems to be one secular, I will return to the church at once. Indeed, I have just been informed by the pew opener that for the last hour and a half, Miss Prism has been waiting for me in the vestry.
Prism? Did I hear you mention a Miss Prism?
Yes, Madam Bracknell, I'm on my way to join her.
Pray allow me to detain you for a moment. This matter may prove to be of one of grave importance to Mr. Bracknell and I. Is this Miss Prism a female remotely connected with education and of repellent aspect?
She is the most cultivated of ladies and the very picture of respectability.
It is obviously the same person. May I ask what position she holds in your household?
I am a celibate, madam.
Miss Prism, Madam Bracknell, has been, for the last 3 years, Cecily's esteemed governess and only companion.
In spite of what I hear of her, I must see her at once. Let her be sent for.
She approaches. She's nigh.
I was expected me in the vestry, dear Canon. I have been waiting for you there for the last hour and 3/4.
Prism! Come here, Prism. Prism, where is that baby? 28 years ago, Prism, you left Mr. Bracknell's house, 12 on Park Avenue, in charge of a perambulator that contained a baby of the male sex. And you never returned. Through the elaborate investigations of the Metropolitan Police, the perambulator was discovered at midnight in a remote corner of Brooklyn. It contained the manuscript of a 3-volume novel of more than usually revolting sentimentality. But the baby was not there. Prism, where is that baby?
Madam Bracknell, I admit with great shame that I do not know. I only wish I did. The plain facts of the case are these. On the morning of the day in question, a day that is forever branded on my memory, I prepared as usual to take the baby out in its perambulator. I had also with me a somewhat old but capacious handbag, in which I intended to place the manuscript of a work of fiction that I had written during my few unoccupied hours. In a moment of mental abstraction for which I can never forgive myself, I deposited the manuscript in the bassinet and the baby in the handbag.
But where did you place the handbag?
Do not ask me, Mr. Worthing.
Miss Prism, this is a matter of no small importance to me. I insist on knowing where you deposited the handbag that contained the infant.
I left it in the cloakroom of one of the larger railway stations in New York.
What railway station?
Grand Central, the New Haven line.
I must retire to my room for a moment. Gwendolyn, will you wait for me?
If you're not too long, I will wait here my whole life.
Uncle Jack seems strangely agitated.
This noise is extremely unpleasant. It sounds as if you're having an argument, and I dislike arguments of any kind. They're always vulgar and often convincing.
Your guardian has a very emotional nature.
The suspense is terrible. I do hope it will last.
Is this the handbag, Miss Prism? Examine it carefully before you answer. The happiness of more than one life depends upon your answer.
It seems to be mine. Yeah. There's the injury it received through the upsetting of a Gower Street bus. And younger and happier days. And there is the stain on the lining caused by an explosion of a temperance beverage. An incident that occurred in Lexington. And there in the locker my initials. I forgot that in an extravagant mood I had them placed there. The bag is undoubtedly mine. I'm so delighted to have it so unexpectedly restored to me. It's been a great inconvenience being without it all these years.
Miss Prism, more was restored to you than you know. I was the baby you placed in it.
You?
Yes. Mother.
Mr. Worthing, I am unmarried.
Unmarried? I do not deny that that is a serious blow. But after all, who has the right to cast a stone against one who has suffered? Why should there be one law for men and another for women? Mother, I forgive you.
Mr. Worthing, there is some slight error. There is the lady who can tell you who you really are.
Madam Bracknell, I hate to seem inquisitive, but would you mind telling me who I am?
I'm afraid that the news I have to give you will not altogether please you. You are the son of my poor sister, Mrs. Moncrief, and subsequently Algernon's elder brother.
Algy's elder brother? Then I have a brother after all. I always knew that I had a brother. Cecily, how could you ever have doubted that I had a brother? Miss Prism, my unfortunate brother. Dr. Chasuble, my unfortunate brother. Cecily, my unfortunate brother. Gwendolyn, my unfortunate brother. Algy, you had better start paying more respect to me. You've never treated me like a brother in all your life.
Well, not till today, I admit. I did my best, however, though I was out of practice.
Oh, my own one. But what own are you? Now that you've become someone else.
Good heavens, I had quite forgotten about that fact. I suppose your decision on the subject remains irrevocable?
I never change. Except in my affections.
What a noble nature you have, Gwendolyn.
Well, then the question of my name has better been cleared up very quickly. Madam Bracknell, I was christened, was I not?
Every luxury that money could buy, and including christening, had been lavished upon you by your fond and doting parents.
Then I was christened. That is settled. But what name was I given?
Being the eldest son, you were naturally christened after your father.
Yes, but what was my father's Christian name?
I do not know at the present moment what the general's Christian name was, but I have no doubt that he had one. He was eccentric, I admit, but only in later years, and that was the result of the Indian climate and marriage and indigestion and other things of that kind.
Algy, can't you remember what our father's Christian name was?
My dear brother, we were never even on speaking terms. He died when I was just a year old.
Well, his name would appear in the army list at the time, would it not?
Well, the general was essentially a man of peace, except in his domestic life, but I have no doubt that his name would appear in any military directory.
Well, the army lists of the century are just here. These delightful records should have been my constant study. Let's see. N generals. Malum, Moxbum, Magley. What ghastly names these have? Markby, Migsby, Mobbs, Moncrief. Lieutenant 1875. Captain, Lieutenant Colonel, Colonel, General 1905. Christian names, Earnest John. I had always told you that my name was Earnest. Well, naturally it's Earnest. How could you ever have doubted that it was Earnest?
Oh, Ernest. My darling Ernest, I felt from the first that you could have no other name.
Well, Gwendolyn, it's a terrible thing for a man to find out that all his life he's been speaking nothing but the truth. Can you forgive me?
I can, for I feel quite certain that you are to change.
Gwendolyn, my own one.
Letitia.
Frederick, at last.
Cecily, at last.
Gwendolyn, at last.
My nephew, you seem to be displaying signs of triviality.
On the contrary, Madam Bracknell, I've just realized for the first time in my life the vital importance of being earnest.